Welcome to the Daily Devo. My name is Diana. Today we are talking about how God brings his people out of bondage. Did you know that God's hand brings his people out of bondage? That's what the Bible tells us. As you read through the Old Testament, one theme that you will notice is just how often the people of God are reminded that God brought his people out of slavery in Egypt with his mighty hand and his outstretched arm. Listen to one reference. It's found in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 15. It says this, "Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." This is just one of the many, many examples in the Old Testament that is reminding us that God brought his people out of captivity and into freedom, that God moved against the most powerful and controlling leader at that time in history, and God brought his people into freedom even against that strong human leader. What a mighty hand and what an outstretched arm. Think about it. God himself got involved in the struggle of his people, and God himself made a way to bring his people to freedom. Today, remember how this statement, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, it invites us to think about the fact that God himself, who is motivated by love, chooses to get involved and help his people. That God himself draws near. That God himself made a way in the past and he makes a way today. That God himself brought his people out of captivity with his own mighty hand then, and he's doing the same today. Maybe this will help you. Have you ever spent time around a pool when young kids are all playing with their parents? Well, often, near the end of the time, when it's time to leave, a dad will lean down and very easily lift the young child out of the pool. It's effortless, really. And usually, if this child were to try to climb out of the pool on its own, it takes a bit of time and some struggle to push up against the water and get themselves out and to manage to move on from the day. In the strong hands of the Father, the child is scooped up from the water with no resistance. The mighty hand of God that willingly and easily gets involved to deliver his people from captivity. Here's a final idea for today. Today's verse, it reminds us it's of the specific command where God said, honor the Sabbath, the day set apart for the Lord, to work for 6 days and to set one day aside to rest and to be with God, to spend time with him, to think about God's character and all that God has done. What if today you and I reflect on the fact that God himself stretches out his arm and with a mighty hand, he gets involved in the struggles of his people. He did it then and he does it today. Spend some time talking about that with the Lord today in your own Sabbath. Spend some time believing the truth that God cares, God gets involved, and God is stronger. Think on these things today.